Hello and welcome back to another episode of the CrossFit Harrow podcast. We are episode 77 and today we have Rebekah in. Rebekah, thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
First question that goes out to everybody, why CrossFit Harrow?
So I suppose there are two reasons really. First one, I was looking for something that was going to help me get fitter and stronger in quite a limited amount of time to be able to take my black belt grading for Tae Kwon Do.
Okay.
I've got coming up. And this was, I'd seen some videos, I knew some people who'd done CrossFit elsewhere, so I had a good idea of the sorts of things that I'd be doing, and I knew that it would be helpful, as well as having coaches and classes and all of those kinds of things that help with motivation. So that was the first thing that came across my mind, but was also really looking for something to get back into a proper level of fitness. Okay. To get back to where I was before I injured my shoulder, which was 4 or 5 years ago, something like that. So that's sort of a longer term.
Okay. Talk us a little bit more through your shoulder. What happened or what's gone on with your shoulder?
So I was doing a lot of boot camp sessions. So I was doing British military fitness, so running out around the park, doing all the
in the great British weather.
Brilliant British weather. The best sessions I had must have been in the snow. We did one frosty, sunny December morning, because you've only got the hardcore there. You've got the people who really want to be there.
Yeah. If you wake up and half think I'm not going, then you eliminate yourself out of that.
Yeah, exactly. So I was doing that. I've been doing that for a few years. Just had a particular session that was all upper body work, lugging power bags around the park, press ups, dips, all of these kinds of things that I'm just not brilliant at anyway. Fatigued, I imagine. Form went, and actually the ligament in the front of my shoulder, so it's tendon in my chest, just went pop.
Oh.
Which was quite painful over a period of time.
I would imagine, yeah.
Yeah, I ended up, walk around like a little T-Rex because I couldn't extend my arm, I couldn't open doors, I could barely hold a cup of coffee. It was quite debilitating. But it also took them 6 months plus to work out what had actually happened to get me through for an MRI and all of those kinds of things, by which point all the muscles had wasted all down my back, all in my shoulder. So it was...
So you were restricted for 6 months before you knew anything, really?
Yes, yeah.
Wow.
Couldn't train, wasn't doing, I was trying to do bits and pieces, and kind of Tae Kwon Do is a thing I've been doing for years, so tried to carry on doing that, but it was really frustrating just not being able to do it properly.
Okay, man. Talk us through about Tae Kwon Do, because I don't know too much about it personally. I'm assuming it is a mixed martial art as such, but I think we kind of know mixed martial arts more as like UFC kind of stuff.
So it's not a mixed martial art, it's just a straight martial art. It's founded in Korea, so it's a Korean martial art, and those who are in the Korean army in both the north and south, when they do their national service. Still now, they learn Tae Kwon Do, and they have demo teams and all of that kind of thing. It's not that old, even though it's been steeped in a great amount of history. It only came to being in 1955. And yeah, a lot of it is founded in some moves from karate, so if you look at them, they're relatively similar, but there's a lot more kicking in Tae Kwon Do. Yes, that's what it's really known for.
And karate is more like self-defense, is that right?
Martial arts in themselves aren't straight self-defense. There'll be aspects that you take from it, but it's often tidied up so much in the martial arts sense, because it's very technical, very specific. You wouldn't see like a straight transfer across to self-defense.
Fine.
But things you learn, like how to punch, how to block, where to punch, for example. If you ever got yourself into a situation where you needed the self-defense, they're the sorts of skills that will help you out, rather than the straight techniques that we do.
So where for you did this love for Tae Kwon Do start, or how did it start?
A friend of mine had done a taster session way back in school, so I've been training for nearly 20 years, so took him quite a long while. So my friend had done some taster sessions that were run by a local instructor.
Okay.
She mentioned it to me on the walk home, and she was going to go
from school.
And she mentioned she was going along to the proper classes. I went, oh, can I go with you? And nearly 20 years later, here we are.
You still kept up with that? Wow. What age were you?
15.
Okay. So that kind of, at that point in your life as well, I would imagine that it gave you quite a lot of confidence.
So to improve my fitness and all of those kinds of things, I was not a sporty kid in school.
Well, these are some of the... Yeah, I'm glad you got there. I was going to ask you these.
No, I was definitely not a sporty kid in school.
Okay.
Always gave it a good go, but I was never in the in crowd, and the in crowd were the sporty ones.
But I think I've said in a couple of podcasts before, I think naturally through school, you go through the choice of like football or netball, or like football, basketball, and like generally if you're not good as a bloke, if you're not good at that sport, you kind of get put to the side, and as a female, if you're not good at that sport, you kind of just...
We had netball, hockey and tennis were the key ones.
Oh wow, tennis isn't popular like you don't hear tennis much.
No, I've never been very good at racket sports, just not my thing.
It's the hand-eye coordination.
Netball I find quite boring. When we got an opportunity to try basketball later on, that was much better.
There's people who play netball, listen to this, go, what? Netball?
Not for me, it's just
not for me.
It's
not for everyone,
hockey I really enjoyed.
Yeah?
Turns out probably because it's a little bit violent.
Well, that would make sense.
Yeah, but no, I really enjoyed hockey. Again, I wasn't the best at it, I just gave it a good go. But I think finding Taekwondo when I did, I was just a little bit older, and it was a decision that I made for myself as well.
Yeah.
It wasn't a class that my parents put me into or anything like that. It was something that I chose to go along to and just have kept on going.
And it's very interesting at stage that you chose it, because generally like being 15, not really aware of like the fitness element of things. It's more of a case of like you having massive amounts of fun during that session. You're ticking boxes in like terms of like self-development, like being able to start socializing more with people, being in the company of other people with different cultures, backgrounds, everything else, and also boosting that self-confidence element of stuff.
And that socialising side of it has been really important.
Yeah.
Because I've carried on doing Taekwondo all the way, so finishing school, went to university, lived with my parents or my dad for a little while, so I trained there, then went off or came up to London. And I've been in different clubs, and without knowing, like I moved to London on my own, I didn't have any friends here or anything when I moved.
Where from? Where did you move from?
North Dorset.
Okay.
Which is where I grew up. But it was an instant group of people who, twice a week, every week, you're doing something, you've got something in common, and you just get to know people and talk to people.
Similar to what you do now.
Yeah, definitely. You see the same people, you get to have a bit of a chat about what's going on.
Yeah.
But also you're focusing on something different. And like I say, different people from different walks of life.
Yeah.
Which is, it's really important, really interesting.
So you left North Dorset to come to London. So you've done all school through North Dorset?
Then went up to university in Aberystwyth, so deepest, darkest mid Wales.
Yeah, I was just about to say, I think that sounds like Wales.
Yeah. On the coast, so I had a seafront facing room for 2 years, which is absolutely
traditional
glorious.
British weather.
Well, yeah, because you spend most of your time at university in the winter.
What did you study at uni?
Maths.
Okay.
So it's a straight maths degree, so a straight split between pure applied and statistics.
Which, when I asked you, what I was going to say about statistics, when I asked you at the beginning about a bit of background with Taekwondo, you was able to roll off statistics just like that. The year it was founded, etc.
We, as part of our grading, we have to know the theory, and some of that is about the history of when it was inaugurated, when it came to the UK, but also all the terminology in Korean as well. So coming up to grading, they're the kinds of things that I really should be able to
You've given me a fantastic idea to implement here.
Theory.
Learning like why, when and how. That's actually, I can see the value in that. I understand why. And
testing it. Well, the idea of knowing the Korean is that you could walk into any club, any dojang as it's called,
Dojang, okay.
Anywhere around the world, and they'll tell you dolio chagi, which is turn and kick, and you'll know exactly what to do. So it's that principle.
Wow. Have you ever been out to Korea?
I went to Seoul a couple of years ago, so a limited bit of Korea.
And did you do some Taekwondo out there?
I didn't do any, but we did find where the national demonstration team were giving a demo out in one of the tourist locations. So I went to have a look at that.
That must have been pretty cool.
It was. It was weird in the sense that, so when they start off there, they start in a military salute and things like that, because it's done for the military, which is quite different from what we do with bowing and all of those kinds of things. But yeah, fundamentally it's all the same.
And then, so at uni doing maths, what was sport like for you at uni? Were you part of the teams?
I ran the Taekwondo club while I was there for
a
while. So yeah, I'm a qualified instructor. We had an instructor there for the first year, but he was unfortunately unable to continue after my first year. So we took it over as a student-run club.
And then you at that point decided, did you do your qualifications for that at that point?
Yeah, or slightly afterwards. But yeah, I was doing the qualification. Then we had to get special permission from the association to open back up again and all of those kinds of things. But yeah, it was a great experience getting to know people.
Was it popular?
I like to think so. As soon as I was running.
Well, no, because I would imagine like a lot of uni clubs would incorporate weightlifting, maybe running, netball. I don't know actually if uni do netballs, but definitely football, rugby, like predominantly those sports.
It was. I mean, we had good numbers coming.
Yeah.
It's
something different for people, isn't it?
It's something different. Again, loads of different people. Like, whilst we do things with partners, for example, you do those techniques with anybody of any size. You do your sparring training with anybody of any size. But there's also an amount of stuff that is just you doing things solo, back and forth in lines and all of that kind of thing.
Yeah.
So if you're not that into team sports, it's a good place to go to get to know a group of people, but you're not dependent on other people or they're not dependent on you. It's a bit like here, you're only competing and improving yourself.
Yeah. And I would imagine obviously there is a competitive element to Taekwondo too. But at the same time there isn't. Like you can completely, not necessarily eliminate it, but you can not be so thrown into that side.
There are competitions, but it's entirely a choice as to whether you go and compete. There's no...
Because that's not the kind of ethos, right? It's behind it.
And there's no obligation to. Out of all the people who are doing Taekwondo in the country, very few of them will go and compete. I myself, I'll compete for the patterns, which is equivalent to the kata or forms that you get in karate.
Okay.
And they're marked more like gymnastics or those kinds of things.
Okay.
But I don't like sparring in competition. It's just not for me. It's not why I do it.
Yeah. So having done that at uni, did you see that grow over the 3 years? Did you see it get bigger and bigger?
The club?
Yeah.
Yeah, it was. I can't remember how many people we had, but there was a good core of people who were turning up.
Good.
And we'd go out on socials and all of those, university experience.
Yeah. Well, living the whole uni life, right?
Yeah, exactly. And we had some really, really good sessions and really great fun all together. And I still get messages, certainly when those who continued training sort of got their first black belts and all of those kinds of things, would get, thank you messages and all of that kind of thing, which is very rewarding.
I could imagine that'd be quite rewarding. What does that black belt, and not necessarily in title, what does it show? What does it represent? What's the easy way to... I mean, I've got a small understanding of what it might mean.
It represents an element of dedication and commitment.
Okay.
Particularly as there are minimum training times. So with the association that I belong to, you have to be training for a minimum of 3.5 years before you get your first black belt. Okay.
And is it just black belt?
So that's your first dan.
Okay.
And then you go on from there to get second, third, and so on.
Okay.
And there you've got a minimum of, so the dan grade that you're going for, that's the minimum number of years you need to train for between gradings. So between first and second dan is 2 years, between second and third is 3 years, and so on. So I'm going for my fourth dan in a few weeks' time. So
you've done 4 years?
Minimum. It's been 7 for me because of the injury.
Right.
So it's been a while.
I guess that's quite a good way to do that grading system, because essentially in those years, what you're doing is repetition over repetition of you're not, I wouldn't say developing new skills, that's not the right way to put it, but you're becoming more body aware.
Yes.
Doing that. And that's actually one thing that we've spoke about quite regularly here, is how can we make people more body aware.
And doing this, even within 3-4 weeks, massively more aware of everything from where I had been coming out of lockdown and not having done a lot of training. Just that instant sharpness was really there. Yeah. The idea as well is with that amount of time between gradings, you go back and improve everything that you've already learned.
Yeah, and becoming more and more competent. Yeah. That's actually a very good way to look at that grading, actually. You're never gonna. The only way that you'd move backwards is if you stop doing it. So doing this, not necessarily the same thing every day, but you're, as we said, repetition, repeating those things in order to, like, they just get installed within your brain.
And then it's those minor adjustments to take it from being good to being really good, and maybe beyond. So how many of those are there?
So there are 9 degrees of black belt in total.
Right.
Only our senior members of the council at the moment are 9th degree black belt.
Does that just basically mean that you kick ass?
Yeah, I really wouldn't want to argue with any of them.
Is it stuff like you see in the movies? Is it like literally like...
Some of the videos of them in their slightly younger days are phenomenal. And even now, they're all really lovely and really friendly, but you would not want to get on the wrong side.
Stunt doubles and things like that? Possibly?
No, they could be, I'm sure, but it's not. They're Taekwondo through and through. It's their life and livelihood, and have made the association into what it is today.
Yeah. So 9 grading systems. What does it mean, like, when you're at the top? You are essentially a role model for those below.
Yeah, and when you get to after 5th dan, although you've got your minimum grading times, you are also awarded the next degree on merit. So you don't do a grading or an exam anymore. You have to show that you are giving back to the association and giving back to the community. So things like running clubs, running competitions, seminars, all of those kinds of things as well. The people who are getting to 6th dan and onwards are really, they're the ones doing that, running 3 or 4 schools, or all of those kinds of things.
That's pretty
as well.
cool.
Yeah.
So it almost like it's like grown like from the bottom up, really, isn't it? And then do you find that, in your experience in the last 20 years you've been doing it, do you find like people drop in and drop out of it, as in like they'll go through stages of it, or do you find that they, unless injury obviously, but do you find that they just, once they're in, they stay with it and it's something that they're looking to bring forward with them?
Once you get to a certain point, probably 2nd or 3rd dan, then you're in it for the long haul.
Right.
You've been training then for 10 plus years, something like that.
Okay.
You're not going to go through that amount of time and absolutely love it the entire time. There's peaks and troughs with, have bits that just, weeks when things aren't quite working properly and you hate it.
What would training look like? Would that be like 4 or 5 times a week, if not more?
No, so minimum training guidance is twice a week.
Oh, right, okay.
Some of it depends on instructors and availability of clubs.
Yeah.
My instructor, for example, runs, or before COVID, was running classes 6 nights a week. So if you wanted to train 6 nights a week, you could. For me, 2 to 3 times a week is right for me. That gives me enough to keep me going.
Balance.
But without balance, exactly.
Yeah. And then at what point does like someone get into the teaching element of it?
You can start teaching, you can start doing your teaching qualifications from 1st degree black belt. Some instructors will ask their senior colour belt, so red belt, red belt and black tag, to help out as well. And yeah, you can do it whenever after that. But like any teacher, I always think it's something that you have to really want to do.
Yeah, of course.
Because you need to be inspiring.
Well, then it doesn't become your hobby then.
Yeah,
your
exactly.
hobby then changes a little bit more into like a career element, really, doesn't it?
Yeah.
So do you find that with the grading and the different colour of belts, do you find that some of it, or it can be a status thing? Is there an ego attached to that? Is that dismissed? Is that just put to one side from day dot?
The hierarchy is about the colour of your belt.
Okay.
It doesn't matter how old you are, what gender you are, anything like that. It's all about the colour of your belt. So some, a 12-year-old who's got a 1st dan will stand in, higher up in the lines than a 50-year-old who's come in at yellow belt, and that's how it is. Ego doesn't really come into it again, because you're really competing with yourself and improving yourself. It's about you. We find those that have that ego are more likely to probably drop by the wayside, and it's maybe not for them.
Okay. Your upcoming grading for the 4th dan.
Yeah.
What does that involve now? What have you got to do?
So there are a few stages to go through before the actual grading. The next one is I've got a pre-grading assessment,
right,
which is next week.
Okay. How are you feeling about it?
all right at the moment.
The
Maybe
close
this time next week, maybe not so much.
Yeah.
But that's effectively a mock grading in front of one of the examiners.
So would you get feedback then to be like, this is what you've done really, really well, this is what you didn't do so well?
Yeah, I mean, to a large extent now, with 4 or 5 weeks to go, any major issues, you get pulled out of the grading because there's not enough time to resolve them between now and then.
So it's pretty like clinic, like.
Yeah. So yeah, I've got that one. A couple of extra training sessions that I need to go to, and then the grading itself is towards the end of October.
How long is that grading?
It'll probably be about 20 minutes, something like that. So we go through all the different disciplines that we have within the martial arts. So you've got line work, which is doing your techniques, moving up and down in lines, the patterns.
Hence the name.
Yeah. Still have to explain it though.
No, of course.
Yeah,
I didn't know.
But it makes sense once you've explained it, right?
Yeah, of course.
So the patterns, that's one of the biggest parts of the grading, because you do so there are 3 that I need to know for my grade, but you also go through at least 1 from all the other black belt grades and all of that kind of thing. We have set sparring, which is more like self-defense drills, still very formulated, so you know exactly what technique's coming towards you, and you have a set routines that you're going to be doing.
Would this be like where there are other people almost like fighting against you?
You're in pairs. So you've got one person who steps forward and punches and attacks you. And
like role play, essentially.
A little bit, yeah.
Okay, yeah. The reason I asked that question is I've seen there's a guy that I know from a long time ago. I think he's a mixed martial arts or something to do with like Krav Maga kind of stuff. And he often will put some of not the official grading videos, but like mocks up, and it does look very, very hard. They don't necessarily work in pairs, but in one of his videos there would be one person undergoing their assessment, and there would be a group of like 8, and they would do different different striking techniques, different attacks, and that person would obviously be combating them. I was just imagining it to be like that.
Thankfully not quite like that. Similar idea though, you've got your attack coming towards you and you're working out how to defend it, but probably more rigid or formulated the way that we do it. Then we also have sparring, which is the more fighting side of it. And as a black belt, you also have destruction, so that's board breaking.
This is the things that a lot of us see on the internet.
Yeah, those. Which is going to be interesting, having not done any of that through lockdown.
What are they, just planks of wood?
We have specific breaker boards, because if we were just using planks of wood, that would be
but as in like different, I mean, obviously there's different cuts of wood and stuff, but are they literally that similar concept?
So the plastic breaker boards, probably 1.5 centimetres thick. They've got a line through them, so they're pre-broken. Right. But that requires, so to break a board, you need precision as well as force and those.
Yeah, I was gonna say X amount of force. Yeah.
Yeah. The breaker boards, if you don't hit it on the line, doesn't matter how hard you hit it, it's not going to break. Whereas a plank of wood, you can hit it anywhere and it will usually break.
Do you guys do like these things with like you'll put like 2 or 3 on top of each other?
No, so the demo team that I saw in Korea had those because it looked impressive, right? They go flying off everywhere.
Someone would headbutt like 9 of them and they'll just go.
Yeah, but they're like wafer thin, and I did watch the demo crew pre-scoring a load of the boards. So the techniques are impressive, but when you see them breaking boards like that, it's not.
I feel like I've been sold a dream for the last 31 years of my life.
Yeah, but when they're doing jumping 720 kicks or whatever else it is that they're doing, I'm like, pre-score all the boards you like.
I would imagine they're like the ones that are a little bit higher, and you're having to like pivot on one foot and kick.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, that's pretty impressive.
Oh yeah, no, I can't do that.
That is pretty cool.
Before you ask me to try and demonstrate it.
You show us, actually. So you've got that will last around the 20-minute mark, and then that will mean then that you've got your 4th dan.
If I pass.
If you pass.
If I pass.
Fingers crossed.
Yeah.
And then you have to wait 5 years.
Minimum of 5 years.
For your 5th dan.
As long as I'm training regularly and I don't injure myself again.
Well, fingers crossed that we don't. And then is your goal with that to go the whole way?
I don't know, it'll be... 5th dan is the next goal. After that, though, there's no more grading, so it will really depend on what else is going on in my life. Because, like you say, it's that distinction between it being a hobby and then it being something more than that. And I have a career, I have a job. Taekwondo is my hobby. And whilst I've helped instruct and those kinds of things, it will be, whether I want to take it further or not.
Which is very fascinating too, because I think, especially within fitness, especially with like the lockdown element, I think a lot of people's hobbies were fitness, and then decided that maybe they wanted to give it a go, as make it a career, or gained a bit of traction, and that hobby still remained a hobby, and actually weren't able to execute as well on it. It's like, because it's a completely different ball game.
Yeah.
Just because you're good at something doesn't necessarily mean that you can do that with other people and instruct or coach them.
And the good instructors or the good coaches are those who know that.
Yeah.
And it is a skill. It's hard teaching and instructing.
Yeah.
Very rewarding, but very frustrating. At times.
Yeah, at times. Sometimes more frustrating times than others. But
sorry about that.
But I guess at the end of the day, I think it's like knowing that you are having an impact. If going into teaching is having an impact on that person or people that you're dealing with, to help them get closer to what they want of the reason that they came to in the first place. That's the aim. Work-wise, career-wise. So you've done maths.
I did.
Come out of uni with a maths degree, full maths degree. What was your choice of career from? Have you always been in the same industry? Let's go through that process.
Yeah, so I am a statistician. That is my job.
I'm going to have trouble saying that along the way.
Stato will do.
Stato.
You don't want to try telling people what you do after a few drinks in the pub. It doesn't end well. And I work for government.
Right.
So I'm a civil servant. And that's pretty much what I started doing out of university, barring 6 months or so when I was just working out what I wanted to do and everything.
Did you just fall into that?
Yeah, pretty much. One of my peers from uni had mentioned that they'd started applying for the civil service graduate scheme, the fast stream. I'd never heard of it, but then looked it up and was like, yeah, why not? Let's give it a go. Wasn't quite successful at my first go, but managed to go in through a slightly different route. It's that's what, like, working for the public sector is what I've done. I don't know anything different. No desire at the moment to know anything different either. So it's work my way up through the ranks.
Do you find that is your role member facing? Do you have to deal with people in data, or do you take that data and turn it into something?
I've had a bit of both
throughout
my career. So there's lots of different roles that you can do as a statistician in government. Some of them, as you say, are that data collection and producing those statistics. So anything that you see in the news around GDP or inflation, that will be government statisticians working at the Office for National Statistics. They're collecting the data and putting the data out there. Or alternative, like you say, you can use that data if you've got particular questions that customers, they're internal customers, so those who are drawing up government policy or operations, so those working on the front line. If they want.
Well, they need information that they need.
Yeah, so if they want some information to work out what new service they're going to deliver, for example, that's the kind of thing that you'd want to gather some evidence and try and work out. So
I would imagine that you were pretty busy over the last 18 months. More than ever.
Yeah. So I work at international trade at the moment. So obviously lots of things going on there. Don't have anything to do with the EU exit side of things or negotiating trade agreements. There are different teams that do that. But yeah, working on thinking through some of the supply chain things that have been going on and working out how to analyse it and getting data fast enough to be able to analyse it as well. It's been a really interesting time.
And also relying on that data being accurate, right? Like because if you ask, as an example, if you are the validity of some of the tests that may be done, if you were to ask someone a question on a Monday, they might give you a separate answer or a different answer than if you ask them on the Wednesday.
Yeah, so part of what we do is trying to articulate the quality of that information. So we can't make it more accurate. But what we can do is explain how accurate it is or what limitations there are,
to the answers that have been provided.
Yeah. And a single answer is right or wrong. When you start aggregating hundreds and thousands of data points, you have something on average that is probably about right. But it's about how right is it? So you're never going to quite know. There's estimates and ranges.
Yeah, well, I guess that
nothing's
ever 100%, is it?
But that's a lot of what I do now, is more around explaining what you maybe should or shouldn't or can and can't do with bits of data,
right?
Rather than collecting it myself.
Fine. And then with the balance of like work and training and grading and everything else, has that worked? Well, obviously it's worked out pretty well.
Ups and downs. When I injured myself, I probably went far too far into work.
I was actually going to ask you that next and say, did you throw yourself completely in at work because
way too much.
You had so much spare time?
Yeah.
Your spare time would have been filled by training or socialising with those from...
Yeah, and I hadn't realised just how much that exercise was bringing that balance and helping my mental health until I was way too far into it the other way. So again, it was just about finding some of that balance again, and then lockdown hit. And obviously working from home, you've not got the commute or anything, even more time.
Was your role before at home or?
No, so we could work at home. So I was working at home 1 or 2 days a week, but we were office based. So yeah, the transition then to fully working at home and looking after the team and making sure they were working and everyone was all right was a big challenge.
Yeah, that whole working, like a lot of people got very, or they still are very comfortable with that working from home. And I understand why. It is the commute that saves people.
Yeah, it was one of those weird, everybody begrudges the commute, but it really does give that distinction and that indication that actually, no, we're not working anymore, we're at home.
But it was so frowned upon like years ago that like working from home can't happen.
Yeah.
And now it's like, stay at home for a little bit more till maybe November time. When the injury did happen, and you said that, you were finding yourself getting back into a bit more and then lockdown hit. Yeah. How did you cope with that process of like losing that a little bit, like losing that traction?
If I'm honest, I didn't really cope. It was horrible because I'd literally the week before lockdown, I'd just gone, right, I'm going back to training, I'm going to be there twice a week, I'm on this, I'm feeling good.
This is the first lockdown?
First lockdown. And then that was it. My instructor was giving us training plans to do at home, things like that, but I live in a flat, I don't have a lot of space, and it just wasn't possible for me to do it. So my coping mechanism, for want of a better word, was just bury my head in the sand, ignore it all, eat a lot, and then just wait it out. Not the healthiest decision, but that's kind of just what I needed to do at that point. I wasn't trying to do the online plans at home, was just making it worse. So I just got to a point, for my own self-preservation, let's just give it a break. But actually having that break when we then got to go back was really helpful because it reset all of that angst from not being able to train properly for so long.
You took those words out of my mouth, yeah.
Then go back to it, actually everything was a lot better then.
I actually think that, although I don't agree with a lot of the stuff, and I won't get into it because, a lot of people know my feelings, but it forced a lot of people to slow down and like have a bit of a reassessment and stop and be like, right, what do you want from the next 6 months? And maybe not the first month of lockdown, because I don't think people realised that it was going to last as long as it did. Originally, Mr. Johnson told us it was going to be 2 weeks for strain off the NHS, and then it became a month, and then it became 6 weeks, and it became another 2 months.
And that was really hard.
Yeah.
Really, really hard.
Because it was giving people a lot of hope that we were coming out, and I think it got to a point where people maybe accepted. Because they didn't, I certainly didn't. I still remember where like it was happening. I was like, well, fucking, we'll be out of this in a couple of weeks. What the fuck's this shit?
But that's why it was just such. Everybody's been saying it, but it's so unprecedented.
Yeah. It's the first of its kind, like for a lot of us. But yeah, it gave people that time to resit and reevaluate and stuff. And then coming out of it, you were saying that you were it helped you. It came at the right time.
Yeah, so when my instructor started classes up again, different system, like no
contact,
no contact, all socially distanced, sanitize on the way in and out, and all of those kinds of things. And we've still got a lot of that in place now. It was just really good to get back to it and start feeling a little bit more like me again.
Yeah. Did you find you definitely lost that? You lost that feeling of you?
Yeah, I mean, all through the injury and like just so much work and all of that kind of thing, it just kind of lost myself. Sometimes I still don't know. I don't know who I am, but
it, but it is a normal process of it. Like it's a normal psychological process of an injury. Like to find that, like, what's happened? Why am I doing this? What the fuck? Like, that's completely normal.
Well, that's good to know. 'Cause no one told me that at the time.
There's a massive psychological element of injury, and then it comes the acceptance, and then like starting the process of like improvement and everything else, and rehab and stuff. So those sessions that you were getting back to were just slowly finding your feet into it.
Yeah, I'd lost a lot of fitness, put on quite a bit of weight. Things it didn't really feel like my arms and legs were attached to my body for a good few weeks. It was kind of flailing around. But yeah, it was really good to get back into it and be able to do it regularly as well. Yeah. Because we were booking into sessions and all of these kinds of things. Everybody says book your sessions into your diary so it's an appointment that you don't miss. And yeah, it really worked. Just kept persevering. Yeah. And the fitness started coming back. Yeah.
And then you found us just after it was around April, May time, wasn't it?
Yes. Yeah. So it was pretty much as things opened up again, and it was the point where I'd missed the opportunity to grade in April. So the gradings run every 6 months.
Right, and that's set. You don't have.
We don't have control over that because they're national grading. So it's everybody in the country will go. Who's ready to grade will go and do that grading.
Right. Fine.
But although I kind of knew all the stuff for April, there was it might have been at the end of April, it might have been, I think it was postponed until June in the end, but no guarantees of when it would be, and I was just not mentally or physically fit enough.
And they weren't doing any grading online? It's not something that could have been done online?
Not for a black belt grading. It's too much of a prestigious occasion, really, to do that online. And I'd feel cheated.
I was about to say, probably cheated,
Yeah, so I'd much rather have waited and do it this way. But yeah, it was then I started looking for something because I was like, I'm not fit enough to do this right now. And just doing a couple of days a week at Tae Kwon Do, because that's all we're allowed to do at the moment, wasn't going to be enough either. And I've fallen out of love with running because it turns out I only did that because I was already quite fit.
So when you stopped?
Yeah, and then I was like, no, I'm not doing this anymore.
I keep saying it, running's hard.
Running is really hard.
Mentally, I think it's hard. Physically, I think everyone's capable of doing it. I think mentally, you have to, in order to go out for a long run.
But I was doing training for half marathons before I injured my shoulder.
Wow, so you had accumulated quite a lot of miles.
Yeah, the week that I injured my shoulder, I'd just been out for like a casual 10-mile run. I was feeling really good about myself. But I started doing the running after I'd already been doing Tae Kwon Do. I was doing the boot camp and all that kind of stuff. So you sort of fitness is up here. When my fitness is down here somewhere, it's like no.
Yeah, once you get a curveball, like something falls in, it's very but the thing is, when you're in full flow, everything's good. When you have to take a step back through an injury, through work commitments, you might find that like you have less time, or people put on weight, etc. The hardest thing is the comparison, of not to compare. Yeah. Because in your head, whatever task you've got in front of you, you'll always have a comparison of I could or I have done.
And that's where I've really struggled with running, even like trying to get back into it. And I've sort of done a bit, got back up to sort of 5k, got back up to 10k, and then something's happened, sprained an ankle or whatever, and then it's like, I've got to go back again. It's
And actually then when you get that end result of whatever that time might have been, you actually sometimes can feel deflated because it wasn't as good as what it used to. Yeah. Or what you're used to. But in your head, you take no consideration of like the last 6 months, what's happened, or the last year, whatever it might be, your current situation, your current weight, because obviously your weight is also going to affect your running. No look at like your habits, what you've been eating, your sleep. You just think, I used to be able to. And even the fact of like getting older, you know.
Yeah, right.
not you directly, I'm saying in general. You don't, I don't know why we think like that. I don't know if it's, I don't know if it's installed in all of us, but we do. We naturally compare against our best.
Yeah, and you're exactly right. That's one of the things. Like physically, I know I could get myself back up to doing those
just
runs
those
and
small
everything.
Steps.
But mentally, it's too much.
Yeah.
Actually, one of the reasons I've really enjoyed coming here is it's completely different from anything I've ever done before. Even
That's
like
good.
Walking into the first class with Grant, and he's like, "Here's this barbell." I'm like, what? But it's all new.
Yeah.
So there is no comparison aside from last week or a month ago and those kinds of things. So I'm seeing those gains, and it's all new and progression, and it's good.
It's the very exciting time of training in CrossFit. It is when you don't have those comparisons, because there's no element of fear to some degree. Some degree. And it is just a case of like, you've never done it. I don't know what the potential. I don't know what. I'm just going to go for it. Yeah. And that's kind of, I feel like people sometimes lose touch with that too, like go into whatever it might be, whether it be CrossFit, running, swimming, Tae Kwon Do, that you just, originally you were there because you enjoyed it.
Yeah.
And it's just keeping that in touch with that side of things.
But then I also like, at some point, hopefully I'll get to where you're making those marginal things.
Yeah. And that's what it is, marginal.
Really little tiny things that you need to tweak in your technique or the way that you're doing something. Again, to take something from being good to being very good and beyond. I really like that bit and that attention to detail.
Yeah.
Which, you don't see it necessarily in a PR or whatever every
And sometimes
week,
takes ages.
But you get there.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I think the best example to use for that is, let's look at Olympic weightlifting. Some of them will train for 4 years to add half to 1.25 kilo in total to a lift. Like 4 years of conditioning, strength training, sleep, a consistent routine for that 1.25 kilo. It's very marginal gain. Sorry, I've went off.
But it all counts.
Yeah, but of course. Yeah, it does. It does. What's that film where he talks about inches? Are we getting some background noise?
Not noise, they're just jiggling around.
Are we the film? He talks about inches. Is it Vince? No, not Vince Lombardi. There's another day. I can't remember his name. Someone's screaming probably at the camera. It's an NFL rugby team. NFL rugby team. That's not even a thing. It's American football. And they're talking about, he says that inches, I can't remember the speech. It's a fantastic film.
You'll have to go and look it up afterwards.
I will. I was hoping one of the guys behind the cameras would be telling me.
No, they're too busy mucking around.
Okay, so what's the next 6 months look like? What do you want now out the next 6 months? Whether it be, we're obviously hoping for your grading, your fourth grading, fourth down. But what else from fitness are you looking for the next 6 months? Or even 12?
Daft as it might sound, what I would really like to be able to do is at least 10 push-ups on my feet without thinking about it.
Okay.
And that is partially because I've never been able to do it, but also that's how I injured myself. So there's a real mental block with just being able to get on and do it. And that for me, whether it's in the next 6 months or the next 12 months, I think it's going to take a while.
I think that's a fantastic goal.
That is it's something I would really like to be able to do.
Yeah.
So all of the work that we do here, like the regressions of the incline push-ups, which I still really struggle with, it's all working towards that.
Yeah.
So I think that would be my next goal. But just to keep enjoying it and to carry on losing the weight and get stronger and fitter and see all the gains everywhere else.
That's good.
From the physical side, the mental side, the social side. I've remembered I've got personality outside of work. It's brilliant.
That's funny that you say that, because we've been so consumed within work that you almost forget like how to go out and like socialize. Yeah, what's that?
I don't know what that is. Imagine going dating.
Yeah, a lot of the people would find that very, very hard to be able to.
But I live on my own as well, so it's been me and a computer screen and me and then
me, myself,
cat.
and I.
So having a conversation with a real life person, just walking in here and seeing other people was just new.
Yeah, I was fortunate in the sense that like I was able, because of staying in line with the guidelines, everything else, we were able to still have contact or see people on a one-to-one or on a small group. So I was fortunate enough to be in a position where I maybe didn't experience some of the closure as others.
But everybody's story is different. And,
yeah.
you know, as I had a lot of, say, my team at work would always, you know, because we all struggled.
Yeah,
all
absolutely.
Struggled, and they'd be like, oh, this is bad, or I've had a bad day. But it's not as bad as you. And like, everybody's got their own story and their own struggles.
And everyone dealt with it in very different ways. Yeah. But I can only imagine how difficult it would have been for someone at home, just with that screen and like, and that was it, and that no interaction. What does, let's say, life look like for the next 6 to 12 months? What are you, outside of fitness, is there any goals, aspirations that you want from, is it going back, maybe some sort of traveling, seeing the world in some respects?
I'd like to travel. I'm not very good at traveling on my own though.
Okay.
And I am on my own at the moment, so I don't necessarily have a travelling buddy. So probably have to park that one for a little while. But yeah, no, I'd love to get out and see more of the world, particularly back to Latin America and see bits of that. But you know, that's probably way in the future. A lot of it's going to be about bringing that balance back. I've got to a point now in my career where I'm kind of where I want to be for a little while. I've been promoted in the last year. I can go further if I want to, but it's quite a big decision if I want to take the next step up the ladder. It's a very different job. Which is
interesting that you say, because I think a lot of people at work don't know whether they're just in that position, you know, and not know like where they want to be. So it's very good to know that you're in a place at work where exactly you want to be.
Yeah, and I'm at the level now actually where I was probably always aiming for.
So it's a goal that you've met and can tick off.
Yeah.
There we go.
Bit weird once you've met it to work out what you do next.
Yeah.
But yeah, so thinking about what I do want to do next. You know, my job, thankfully, and I know I'm really fortunate that my job is secure, because I know that there are a lot of people out there where that's not the case. But yeah, whether it's a move further outside of London, obviously that would take me away from you guys probably, so, you know, not sure I want to do that. Or just work out what I want to do. And have the freedom to do it and the space to think about it. Yeah.
Very interesting, Rebekah. Thank you so much for your time. Guys and girls, join us again next week. Don't know what happened to my voice there when I went, week. Might have to do that outro again. James, edit this voice. Next week.